At the International Monetary Fund, European nations took 160 billion of the 2021 issue of special drawing rights, compared to African countries' cumulative amount of 34 billion. I'm very happy that today we will be sharing some shares from TDB, and we will be in a good place, different from the situation I'm describing here. An institutional blueprint which administers development financing this way must be changed urgently, and one made that is fit for purpose. The urgent need for socio-economic transformation must therefore translate into an even more urgent need to redesign the international financial institutions and also design and implement a wholly new global green bank to mobilize resources globally and administer them in a truly inclusive, democratic, and equitable manner. Is that all we need to meet the fierce urgency of now? Hardly. Let me first take this opportunity to, on behalf of the people of Kenya, to be grateful to TDB Group for the presentation of the $100,000 to Thome Water project in Laikipia. I can confirm that they deserve every support. And it is true, they've gone through a difficult time of failed rains over the last 5 seasons. At all times, sustainable development is expected to take place within a context characterized by increasingly devastating threats and weaknesses across all sectors. In our time, everyone interested in growing the economy by increasing wealth, creating jobs, eradicating poverty, and reducing inequality has to confront the fundamental challenge of an increasingly tight fiscal space and the emergence of rapidly mutating and highly complicated new threats. All these threats have been explained to us today in the morning, from what happened with COVID all the way to the very unlikely, or so it was thought, war in the middle of Europe, and all the other things in between, and especially the big threat of climate change. It is true that post-colonial Africa struggled to develop because it had very limited resources to liberate its economy from institutions that were extractive by design, a low industrial capacity that ensured that raw materials were mainly exported, minimal economic diversity, and of course, the challenge of political instability. Efforts to acquire resources to break out of this vicious circle of underdevelopment and poverty only plunged many of our economies into an inescapable debt trap, which reduced the resources available to initiate progressive programs and policies, and at the same time made governments more vulnerable to natural as well as human threats across many sectors. The nomenclature of economic classification and development categories is quite telling, with least developed countries and heavily indebted poor countries becoming normalized methods of describing post-colonial Africa and other states of the global South. It has become inescapably clear that adverse climatic events are actively threatening our hard-won development gains, including advances in providing public services like health, education, security, and investment in national infrastructure like transport and communication networks. Reflection on these matters have also defined a critical weakness in the prevailing thinking in development and climate action, which treats the two imperatives as separate, unrelated undertakings. In the course of engaging the international community on these twin imperatives, African countries have found common ground in their unique shared perspectives as climate action frontline territories located at the intersection between environmental disasters, economic crisis, and development constraints. we recognize at once that the adverse impacts of climate change pose real and serious threats to all our achievements as well as prospects with regard to development, and that at the same time, financial capacity and therefore economic development is urgently needed to provide necessary resources to invest in effective climate action. Increasingly, we are having to make the difficult choice between economic growth and climate action, when, as a matter of fact, both courses of action must be pursued simultaneously because they are complementary. One will not happen without the other. On the basis of this realization, African countries have begun to approach multilateral engagement on climate change and economic development from a new perspective, anchored on a commitment to a green, climate-positive growth, and which profiles Africa as the green continent of the future, abounding with natural resources, investment opportunities, and human capital. Volatility in global commodity prices has always exposed the vulnerability of many economies. Often, prices of raw materials exported from these economies collapse drastically, while at the same time, that of such essential imports as petroleum rises steeply. Every episode of such crisis sinks our economies deeper into difficulty, weakening currencies, raising interest rates, and increasing inflation. The most fundamental legacy of COVID-19 now stands as the manner in which it exposed global inequality and injustice. As movement was severely curtailed by the closure of borders and grounding of aviation services, global supply chains were constricted and disrupted, leading to unprecedented distortion of market dynamics everywhere. Many developed industrial nations immediately redirected investments towards the development of essential supplies, including vaccines and protectives, which were stockpiled, exposing importing countries to a near catastrophe. The post-pandemic situation has been difficult, to say the least. We are still on a recovery path, rebuilding after the devastation of tourism, transport, and export sectors. Inevitably, we have taken a massive hit in terms of worsened fiscal imbalance and deeper debt, which has been worsened by the emergence of a high interest rate environment. The geopolitical tension that exploded into open conflict in Ukraine have also intensified this very difficult situation. As an African success story, TDB not only anchors our aspiration for regional and Pan-African integration, it repositions Africa as the emerging site of global transformation and complements our agenda of redefining our continent as the home of abundant opportunity and potential. This capacity to profile Africa effectively in terms of more possibilities and less limits is a significant contribution that unites the Sustainable Development Goals. On this 39th annual meeting of the Trade and Development Bank, I see promise and I also see opportunity. I take this opportunity to appreciate the leadership of my good friend, Mr. Admasu Tadesse. He was among the first people when I was sworn into office to come and offer me some advice, which I take very seriously. Mr. Managing Director, I credit you for your great leadership and vision and the leadership you have provided to your team at the TDB, and you have our support as Government of Kenya and as a shareholder in your great institution. Congratulations to the entire group for your excellent achievements as were listed by the CEO. I wish you all good luck and great success as you continue to work for another purpose, at another place, and at another time, and is now fundamentally inadequate, unjust, and sometimes unfit for the demands of our complex, dynamic, and interdependent world. We must work with them in the context of how do we reform, how do we work with the international financial architecture to recreate it so that it becomes much more responsive in terms of scale of resources available, cost of resources available, and efficiency in how much time those resources are made available. I think there is a healthy, robust debate, and I expect African financial institutions in that debate so that we are not negatively profiled all the time as a risky destination for investment or for development financing. And please, DDB, don't join the people who profile us as a risky place. You should be the ones to say Africa is the best place to invest and that we are not risky at all. In fact, this is a continent that has the highest return on investment, and everybody should be heading in this direction because in any case, we are the continent of the future. We have to reposition ourselves. We have to reposition our continent in the context of the situation, the challenges that face the globe, and we have to reposition ourselves in the context of the assets that we have. Renewable assets, being the continent with almost 65% of uncultivated arable land, being the continent that has the youngest human capital, and being the continent that has the greatest potential for greening growth and ensuring that we decarbonize industrial negative adjectives. Climate change has brought some measure of equality, let me say. In the context of climate change, there is no developing or developed country. We are all in the same place. And being there in the same place positions us as a continent to take advantage of the assets that we have, the renewable assets that we have, the human capital that we have. In any case, by 2050, a quarter of the world's population will be